So I'll still keep an eye on the screen for questions. No, they can just speak out and we'll hear them. Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, the next item on the agenda is are the apologies. We have an apology for lateness that's been received from Her Worship the Mayor. Can I move that someone receives the apology? Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Seconder, Councillor Noonan, thank you. So moved and seconded. And Councillor, thank you. And also noted here, Councillor Bowater is going to be needing an apology for an early departure around 1:15. So
I'll have to leave around 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Councillor Rainey. Anyone else? Very good. We've had the apologies moved and seconded. I'll put it. All those in favour say aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Confirmation of order of business. We are live streaming, as you know, and we're Zooming. Those members joining us by Zoom, if you'd like to ask a question, please click the raise hand option in participants at the bottom of the toolbar. When you're voting, you'll need to click on the yes or no options in the participants pop up. Hopefully that makes sense. You remember that from lockdown. Any recommendations will be shown on the screen as normal. When adjourning, members joining by Zoom, please mute your microphone and stop the camera. People can still hear you on the live stream if you don't. Something to be aware of. A reminder to members in the chamber, please turn on your microphones on and off when we're speaking. Recommendations we displayed on the screens as normal, and of course if you're going to propose an amendment, we'd love to see it in writing. Thank you to those councillors who sent through questions for today's meeting. Joining us, we have Youth Councillors Will Irvine and Jasmine Wayman. Thank you very much for joining us. You're going to be giving us an update which will include in the meeting after the Chair's report. In terms of interests, remember to keep your interest register updated. Does anyone have any interests they'd like to declare? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the report that I'm going to do on behalf of Rotary, where our council's funding, and I'm going to do a report. So that's all.
Yep, very good. Thank you for that. If anything does emerge in the meeting and you realise you have a conflict, just sing out or do the right thing. Public forum, we have no public forum today. Confirmation of minutes, you'll find this on pages 6 to 11 of your agenda. I'm guessing you've had a chance to have a look at them. Yeah. Any corrections? Any questions? Can I have someone move that we confirm them? Councillor McGurk, a seconder would be good. Councillor Rainey, I'll put it. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Hey, so first of all, just something about how we're going to conduct the meeting. As you'll all know, or at least you should know, this isn't just Roger's last meeting with us. This is also my last meeting as Chair of Community Services. And with this in mind, I'd like us to try something a little bit different today. Now, lately, I've heard, I think we've all heard, people expressing surprise, even concern, at the overly formal way we conduct meetings here at Nelson City Council. I've also heard people say that even some elected representatives find the atmosphere can make it difficult for them to express themselves. So I think we should take that on board and today, anyway, try something a little bit different. I believe that tone that I'm talking about can make council less accessible for everyone, including the public. And I think it can potentially stifle the healthy exchange of ideas. I don't believe we need to be formal to be respectful. And so here's what I'd like to do. I propose today we use first names. We avoid ceremonial language like through the chair, with your leave, and these sorts of things that crop up into our chat. I think it's important that we're respectful, but I also think it's important we keep things in perspective. We're not the United Nations. We're not the House of Lords. We're not Parliament. We're a city at the bottom of the world, quite a fair way from the main trunk line. But we're an important city, And we're very important to Nelsonians. So it isn't to say that things aren't important, but I think we can afford to be a bit more relaxed, creative and human in the way we run our meetings. So I think we need to loosen those old school ties a little bit. And I'm encouraged to see no one is actually wearing, oh, Roger's wearing a tie. But it's his last day. Roger can loosen his tie if he wants. So yeah, I'm still going to chair the meeting, and we will have a speaking order, and I will expect you to follow my instructions when it comes to things like the speaking order. But when it comes to how we talk to each other today, I'd like to try, and this includes with the staff, I'd like to include us just being a little more relaxed, respectful and relaxed. And with this in mind, if you are peckish, you don't need to go and stand in the corner and eat. You know, you're not in trouble if you're hungry. You're welcome in today's meeting to bring a plate and eat at the table, as long as you do it quietly and you don't talk with your mouth full. You're welcome. So now I'm going to move to my chairperson's report, which today is going to be a verbal report. And I've got a slideshow. Let's go with it. But first, so it does seem a bit strange for me to be leaving this role after only being asked to take it on a year ago. That said, I'm really happy with what this committee, with the help of council's hardworking staff, has been able to deliver to the people of Nelson Whakatū over that comparatively short and pandemic-interrupted time. In addition to all the reporting and planning that represents business as usual, there are 4 developments that I think deserve to be highlighted. The first, you'll see on the slide with the crowd, is Whanaka Youth taking over the Stoke Community Hall and turning it into a true youth centre. The photo is from the Dawn Blessing, and you'll see me and Rachel Sanson there very early in the morning. It was a great occasion, and it felt great to be there. And that's because it's taken a long time for council to really get the youth ball rolling in Stoke. And I think the work being done by Whanaka Youth's Leanne O'Brien with support of youth leaders like Esther Walters is a huge step forward. Not only are they, with council's support, filling a much-needed gap, they're also furiously sowing seeds for more good growth in terms of things to come for young people to do in Stoke. The activities based at the hall are just a start. Whanaka Youth are engaging with council staff to explore some cool new ways of turning the area between the Memorial Hall and the street into a youth park. A space that will become available if we're able to move the bulk of the parking for the hall from its existing area to the reserved space on the southern side of the building, an idea which is currently being explored. On a personal note, identifying that opportunity while looking at aerial photographs one day with Andrew Petheram, Paul Harrington and Tim earlier this year has been a real highlight of my time in this role. It was a genuine eureka moment. The second achievement I'd like to highlight is the fantastic virtual rebirth of Arts Council Nelson in its new home on Hardy Street, and there it is. The community arts hub that is growing right in the middle of town is, without a doubt, one of 2020's real silver linings for Nelson Whakatū. It's hard to believe that it was only March this year that Mark Preston Thomas, and myself met with Arts Council's Lloyd Harwood and Yanya Heathfield to talk about what the decision to close the refinery for earthquake strengthening would mean for the organisation. And it's fair to say they were not looking forward to everything that came with moving out of their Halifax Street home. And yet, thanks to the Arts Council rising to the challenge and to the support of Nelson City Council, we now have this flourishing community arts centre right in the middle of Hardy Street. As I said at their AGM last night, the turnout and the energy at the launch of the arts space in August was absolutely magic. It was the kind of energy that I think has been a bit dormant in Nelson for a while, and it really was inspiring. So I think we can all be very happy with the way that particular dilemma resolved itself. And if you haven't been down there for a look, then I would strongly urge you to swing by and check it out. And where do I point this? Oh no, that's not what I'm after. Can we go back to that one? Right. So bottom left, you've got the opening night at the new base, the art space for Arts Council Nelson. It was a fantastic night. The third achievement that I'd like to highlight is the imminent arrival of our new Tohunanui beach toilets and changing rooms. Many years ago, when I was a reporter at the Leader community newspaper, I did a story about a concept that local architectural designer Kenny Duke Hettit came up with for the site. A regular visitor to the beach, Kenny Duke was so appalled by these smelly and suspiciously constantly wet old loos that he donated a really attractive design for a new block to the council in the hope that it might trigger some action. It has to be said that Kenny Duke's kind gesture didn't exactly see council spring into action, but it did lodge in a lot of people's heads as something that we really needed to do something about, and finally we're almost there. It's taken a while, but a number of us at this table have pushed for this project, and while the wait, if we hadn't been pushing for this project, the wait would have been even longer. I'd actually like to acknowledge former Nelson City Councillor Mike Rutledge for also being a strong supporter of this project. Mike and I disagreed on a few things during his time on council, but we were totally on the same page when it came to the need for new loos and changing rooms for our beautiful beach. The new facilities are only weeks away, and I have no doubt they'll make a huge difference to what is one of Nelson's key areas, and they'll serve the city well for many years to come. The other achievement that I think really needs to be acknowledged is the launch of Whare Hau Maru, the city's hub for people who are homeless project that is taking shape in St Vincent Street behind the mail room. Last summer, council was, in my opinion, rightfully and repeatedly pilloried in the media for providing facilities for freedom campers ahead of our homeless community. Watching that unfold and getting a better understanding of the plight of our homeless population made me and others around this table determined that Nelson had to do better, which is why I personally constantly banged on about the need for the hub to you guys and staff, particularly during lockdown. I'll admit that progress has been slower than I hoped, and we hit one or two speed bumps along the way, but I am proud that this committee has pushed the issue to the point that council committed to the funding that was needed to get others on board, including the hugely impressive Rotary Clubs of Nelson, masterfully corralled by Gail. I caught up with the mailroom's Philip Chapman last week on the phone, and he is thrilled with the way things are going. He's in awe of the work and skill that's been brought to the project by Rotary, particularly project manager John Hambleton. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever heard him so happy. And just so you know, Gail has an update from Rotary's perspective for us after this report. Finally, thank you for sticking with me. Finally, I'd like to say some thank yous. Thanks to the people who encouraged me to accept Rachel, that's it, as in Rachel Reese's, request that I be recommended to council for this role. Initially, I rebuked her offer, but my wife Tanya, Pete, and my good friend, former Nelson City Councillor Luke Ackland, were adamant that I should embrace the role, and I'm really glad I did. Thank you also to the people who accepted my invitations to come along and talk to us and help our committee get a better understanding of the community issues Nelson Whakatū faces, including Philip Chapman and some of his regulars at the mail room, including Tama and Tipene. Housing First's Ros Verco and Yarp Noteboom gave a fantastic presentation to us. Thank you to them. And also thank you to Health Action Trust's Marcello Ribas. Thank you to Yvonne out there in Zoom land for being the committee's deputy chair and for helping me to keep the speaking lists under control. Most of all, I'd like to thank the two blokes that I've worked with the closest over the last year, Roger and Mark. I have greatly appreciated both your professionalism, commitment and humour. Most of all, I've appreciated your aroha for the Nelson Whakatū community that I think you both demonstrate every day in your work. The same goes for everyone on staff. Everyone on staff that I've dealt with as Chair of Community Services. As far as I'm concerned, you're all little lighthouses of aroha for Nelson Whakatū, and it has been an absolute pleasure working with all of you. Thank you for working with me. And that concludes the chairperson's report. And I'm thank you for looking at the slideshow as well. It's a verbal report, but I understand we do receive them. So if someone, Judine, is going to move.
Matt, do you want to take the other updates before you move?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you for that. We do have 2 more updates, which we'll include before we move and receive the chairperson's report. We're going to hear from Gail on the hub, and we're also going to hear from our youth councillors. So, Gail, the microphone is. You're going to go whoop down there. You don't have to. Well, you don't have to, Gail. We're very relaxed here today. Yeah.
I'll just know that I'm doing this not from this role, but as president of Rotary Club of Nelson. So,
thank you.
Which is why I was going to go down there, but that's cool. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. You've got a paper in front of you which was delivered this morning, and I'll just do some main points, and if you've got any questions then please feel free. The working parties met pretty much weekly, and John Hamilton is just amazing, and he hates being acknowledged, but I can't not acknowledge him because he's really holding this all together. So the purpose of this report is really to let you know that the work, there's been a lot of work that's been completed by our project team with the help of in-kind donations of professional services and at no cost to the project. And the team would like to acknowledge Nelson City Council staff for their preliminary advice relating to resource consent, building consent processes. The only funding yet to be finally confirmed is the Rotary District funding, which I sent off yesterday, and it's very promising. We're expecting that to be a plus and a go. So we should hear about that confirmation, which should come over just after the weekend. The current position is, it's interesting when you get into projects because they're never what you think they're going to be, and this one is no different. It's become quite complex and many complications to be addressed. The need to apply for the resource consent exemptions in terms of the building on site, including parking, drainage and flooding related issues, so they had to be addressed. There's actually a sloping on that site and a ponding potential in the rear third of the site, so the position of the building had to be addressed as to where it was going to go. The width of the site's quite narrow, and the placement of the building had to be thought of in relation to fire rating and the closeness to the boundaries. Met with the board of mailroom last week with John, and they have approved the building proposed design, the site plan and the project scope. And they've also approved the budgets, the funding structure and governance structure, the risk review and a project program. Now, they say attached. I haven't attached those, but if you want to see those, then I'm quite happy to let you have those if you want to. When we first came to you, we had 2 options. We had a classroom that we were looking at to bring over from Marlborough, or looking at going out to get a new build Porticom type of thing. They've come back with, we eliminated the classroom. That just wasn't going to work. It had to be upgraded. It had asbestos, our favourite A word. Had to have compliance, so it just became too complex, and we decided to go with doing an RFP, or request for a proposal for a specifically designed building. So that's what we've gone for. We've gone for a larger building, and that will have space for showers, kitchen appliances. There's much more that's going to be provided. I'm not going to go over all that funding. That's there for you to have a look at. Just that the scope of the building has changed from a 30 square metres to 35, so I've skipped through to page 3 if anybody's following. So yes, we get an accessible shower, an accessible toilet, a laundry, a supervisor's office and a dining area, so it's providing quite a lot for them. We're going to have an increased size of decking with a sloping entry so that people can get in if they need to from wheelchair access. The reconfiguration of the building had to be changed because of the fire rating requirements we needed to the 2 ends of the building. The floor height to mitigate flood risks, so we had to consider that. There's uncertified fill on site, which was a joy. We're going to provide gas, caliphate water heating. And there's a couple of buildings out the back. If anybody's been there, you see a couple of buildings, and one of them needs to be removed. The other one needs to be upgraded. So one of our other clubs has actually put their hand up overnight, and they're going to redo that second building for us. And there's going to be a shade sale. We're going to have signage to acknowledge all the people that have actually provided some professional help in there, just as a in kind, which has been huge. There will be a 40-metre fence between on the north side, just to screen the existing commercial premises. That's out of the scope, but that'll be landowner and kāinga ora, so that's not in the figures. John has put in here that's pleasing to advise that the net project costs to 92,592, including contingency of 9,758, compared to the original budget of 90 plus 4. And of course, we're getting a bigger building. And John acknowledges the efforts to date of the Rotary Club project team, which actually is across 3 of the 4 clubs that are funding. So the skills in the clubs is extensive. So the next steps are to lodge the resource consent and to enter into a contract with the successful bidder for that work. So I'm going to leave it there unless you have, and you probably want to know when this is going to happen. It's probably the only thing not covered there, and we're looking at probably March. So I'm happy to take any questions. If I can answer them, I will. If I can't, I'll get the answers for you.
Sure. Thanks, Gail. March is in time for winter next year, which is good. Any questions for Gail? Very good. Okay, we're going to have thank you, Gail. We're going to have and can you please also pass on thanks from everyone to John and the rest of the team. It's great stuff. Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
Gail, I just had a look. What you're doing is just incredible, and please thank the Rotary Club. And I guess it's just a little bit of feedback. I really like the idea that you're putting gas, caliphate water heating in, because that ensures there's a constant hot water supply. It would be great to explore whether you can use solar hot water heating as well, because that would be a step in your sustainability, ticking off some sustainability tick boxes as well. So maybe if you could just feed that back. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, time now for our Youth Council report, and we've got Jasmine and Will. Jasmine, you going first?
Yeah, I'll start. So on the 23rd of October, that was our last Youth Council meeting for the year until next year. But at that meeting, we had a Youth Council workshop where we talked about the Nelson Plan and the 5 kind of topics under that, which were like freshwater, natural hazards, housing, city centre and climate change. And we got a whole lot of youth from around Nelson, and we had 5 groups working on each of those, which was really good to have a youth voice on that. And then we also had a kind of mini workshop about the youth park that was shown up there with Leanne, and we're working with her to like discuss what youth want, like with the youth park. And yeah, I'll pass over to Will for the recruitment stuff which we've been doing.
Thank you. Kia ora. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Matt. We have just finished up our recruitment process. So our applications closed on the 19th of October. We have 42 applications in, 13 of which are from Nelson College, and 12 of which are from Nelson College for Girls, 8 of which are from Nelson College. I think we had 5 from Garran, 3 from Waimea, and 1 community seat, which is being filled by a current youth councillor who is now returning as a community youth councillor after leaving school. And those, we're going through that recruitment process at the moment. I believe you mentioned the Nelson Plan consultation. We engaged in the consultation that we did there with the youth councillors and the new recruit youth councillors who are invited to sit in the public gallery and watch one of our meetings. A few minor things we've just attended. We recently, well, it's not that recently anymore, it's all slowed down. It's the end of the year. A lot of us are taking exams at the moment. It's 2 weeks out before Nelson College in school, so it's all a little bit slower. But we have instated 2 semi-permanent representatives on the who attend the Giving Araha Anzac Park group, which cooks food for the homeless at Anzac Park, which is lovely. And we celebrated both New Zealand Sign Language Week and Te Reo Māori Week. And I believe I had one more. Sorry. One of us, me, attended the meeting to coordinate the Youth Employment Success Initiative with Ministry of Social Development and a couple of people from council, I believe. And that has successfully launched now, and that's at youthemployer.nz, and it's connecting young people with employers and creating a safe employment relations environment. And I think I'm good. Jasmine, do you want to continue on?
And just one last thing, 5 of us were invited to a meeting with the Prime Minister on the 1st of October, so that was a really cool experience. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Very good. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jasmine. I've got one question. What's going on at Nayland College? 13 applications out of 42, is it? I think it's a very good sign. Any theories?
So in the past, we haven't had very high levels of application from Nayland College. We're both from Nayland, and the Nayland Youth Council this year has been pretty active, I'd say, and obviously the school is growing very fast. The school is, I believe, making some emergency changes to adapt to that growing very fast. But with that, I think there is growing a leadership culture with some strong examples of leadership from our student leaders and from our student board of trustees representatives.
And I think 2 of them might be here today. Nice stuff. Jasmine, you got any theories about what's happening at Nayland?
Yeah, I just think Nayland College has a lot of good leadership qualities, and there's definitely a lot more students.
We're not biased at all.
No, no, you're not. No, I can tell.
I would just
Very
disagreement with them.
Tim,
I was saying, Nayland College is a great school. I turned out brilliant.
look at you. There you go. All the evidence one ever needs, right there.
So is Nelson
Just
College.
before we move on, Rohan.
Yeah, I thought I'd just, as we have had the last youth council meeting, and as youth council's permanent liaison.
Permanent youth.
Yeah, permanent youth. Occasionally I do blend in a little too well. But I thought I'd take a quick moment just to acknowledge the fantastic work that has occurred over the last year, much like us youth council. Had a challenging year. We're thrown into the throes of COVID, and with all of them still managing to balance a large school workload and what is obviously as I remember all too well, a tumultuous time of your life, and still being able to deliver on a whole lot of projects and be involved across a whole range of things. And I just think that Nelson Whakatu is incredibly lucky to have had such a talented and engaged group of young people, including the 2 here, but the whole team of young people providing input and helping us make better decisions. I know that I've had certainly come away from those meetings with a better understanding, even being fairly youth adjacent. And I know that we're going to have another really strong cohort coming in. I really can't call myself youth adjacent. It's just youth still, you're right. But I know that we're going to have another fantastic cohort coming in. Yeah. You're not. Go easy on yourself.
Hey, remember,
you're still young.
Relaxed and respectful.
But I think that just want to really acknowledge the fantastic contribution they make to making our decisions better for young people.
Nice one. And Rohan, is it true that actually the whole reason you ran for council is you're so upset about never having been on youth council?
It's not, but it's a good theory. I did apply and didn't get accepted, so I just sort of circumvented that one.
Well done. Good stuff. All right.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few of the new reapplying youth councillors, and I can confirm that no matter who of these people get in, because it's going to be quite a tough competition, especially at Nelson College for Girls and Nayland College, which can get, I think, maximum of 5 seats for each of those schools, and there's a lot of competition there. But no matter what, they're going to be a good youth council. They're very, very strong applicants. Some people that I'm confused weren't on youth council this year, but they're going to do a very good job.
Nice one. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Jasmine. So that concludes the chairperson's report, kind of the omnibus chairperson's report. Can I have someone move it? Pete moves it and Judine seconds it. I'll put it. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
No. Thank you, Yvonne.
Just joining in. Yay!
Cheers. Rachel, just let you know we're doing things a bit differently today, so you know what you've got yourself into. We're calling each other by our first names. We're not using through the chair or with your whatever. We're going to be relaxed. If people want to eat at the table, that's fine by me, as long as I said earlier, as long as they're not too noisy and they don't eat with their mouths full.
Kia ora, Matt.
Kia ora. when they're talking. You can talk with your mouth full. Sorry, don't. You can eat with your mouth full. Don't talk with your mouth full. That's what I'm saying. Thank you. Okay, so next we're going to move on from the chairperson's report to item 3 on the agenda, the adoption of the Arts, Heritage and Events Activity Management Plan. And we have Shanine joining us with support from Mark. Kia ora, Shanine and Mark.
Oh, g'day, guys. Kia ora.
Nice to see you. Kia ora.
Yo.
I think when we were preparing for this, we were having chats with our colleagues about referring through the chair and things, so apologies if we make any errors.
No worries.
While I'm on that note, this activity management plan has been a collaborative effort with the whole team, and I'd just like to introduce you to those in the public gallery. So we've got Mahina Mark, Sarah Newman-Watt,
Hi, Sarah.
Axel Dimapu, Jenny Thornborough,
Okay.
Stu Dalton, and Steve's up there as well. So they might step down from time to time to answer any questions you have. Okay, so in front of you today is the draft Arts, Heritage and Events Activity Management Plan. And just so you know, this will be updated following any feedback today and also post the LTP workshops which are coming up. And then we'll come back to committee for adoption after the long-term plan has been adopted. This AMP is a bit of a merger. It used to be 2 separate activity management plans. So it's now a combination of what used to be the Arts and the Heritage AMP and is now the Arts, Heritage and Events AMP. There are a couple of amendments I'd like to make. Under 1.9, which is the table around financials, this needs to be amended to reflect the Appendix 1 totals, because we added some things into the appendix that we then didn't update in the table. So apologies for that error, and that will be amended in the next version. And similarly, under 7.26, it refers to Light Nelson or Te Ramaroa. And just to note that that should be biennial, not biannual. Although it would be nice to have 2 Te Ramaroa Light Nelson events. It is actually a biennial, so every 2 years event. The key points or sort of key themes in the AMP or changes since the last one, we have a really strong drive towards iwi partnerships, and that comes really strongly through, as well as the work we've been doing on the Taonga Tuku Iho, formerly known as the Heritage Strategy. So that's really crucial in our work moving forward through this activity. And this plan looks at the implementation of that strategy, as well as implementation of the Founders Strategy, which is the next item on the agenda this morning. The AMP also notes that we'll be doing an events review in year 1. So I'll take the AMP as read and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Janine. So if I was going to give out an award for my year as Chair of Community Services for the best questions and the most questions sent in an email, that award would go to Judine. So Judine gets to ask her questions first. There's quite a few of them, so we might pause and then go to someone else and then go back to your questions if you'd like. But away you go, Judine.
Thank you. Yeah, look, some of my questions were sort of points, and so I'm just going to take them. They've been sent through, and so I don't want to play table tennis for too long, back and forward. So I'll just sort of go with my key overarching ones, because this is a draft. So I'll just reflect that. Just wondering, firstly, the ARC facility for the museum is not mentioned in here whatsoever. And there were a couple of places where I felt page 42 and then also when we talked about the museum earlier on under partnerships, we didn't raise it there either. I'm just wondering why that's sort of omitted.
So the management of assets are currently captured in the asset management plans for the various activities across council. This is predominantly focused on the activities. However, based on your feedback, we will go back and just confirm that in fact there is that alignment.
yeah, because I guess the current ARC facility is actually a functioning, is a ramshackle old building, but there is still an archives and research functioning facility happening at Isle Park. So that's not in here either. So yeah, so the building aside, that actually is a key part of our heritage, is having that research and archive facility at Isle Park. So that would be good if that was reflected in. Just because my book is open on, this agenda is open on page 33, we, in this table of events that we haven't mentioned community events, which actually is a key part. And maybe you think that's other events, but you've sort of given an example of international touring events. And I think of things like, you know, Summer Shakespeare and youth theatre, and we've got so many community events that also don't get council funding necessarily, but they absolutely enrich our community and are a key part of our, you know, events community and, you know, as I said, enriching our community. So I think that really needs to be reflected in there. Just interrupt me when you want, Matt. The next thing is just a general question. Creative New Zealand, you mentioned the funding they give to Nelson Arts Festival. Just wondering if there was any metric around the funding they give to our region. Because anecdotally, it seems to be less equitable to the provinces. And there is some events such as Fringe Festival that got money a couple of years ago, was in there sort of a poster child for, here was not only a great application, but a great outcome, and then subsequently didn't get funding, for example. So I'm just wondering if, you know, we know a bit about what CNZ is doing, just wondering if we had any metrics around that.
I'm about to say through the chair. Thanks, Judy. Creative New Zealand fund Nelson City Council to provide local community arts funding through the Creative Community Scheme.
No, I don't mean that one.
So that's administered through Arts Council Nelson. There's also the Regional Arts Initiative that the community is able to apply for. In terms of metrics, I don't have those at hand and would need to find out more info.
Yeah, I think it would be good because, I mean, we know creative communities is nice, but it's not comparable. And that's tuppence halfpenny blessed.
Some of the other challenges around that is a lot of the community groups and organisations apply directly to Creative New Zealand, and council isn't necessarily looked in, so we don't know what they've applied for and specifically and what they may or may not have received.
So does CNZ do any reporting on the anyway? So
we can look into that for you.
And then I guess finally, I'll just go to some of our targets and levels of service. Just some of them lack, I guess, being a little smart. So if I look at row 1 of public art, for example, on page 41, the target is public artworks listed in council's inventory are celebrated and promoted to the public, rather than any target around increasing our public art, which the rest of the strategy seems to suggest that we want to increase art rather than just have an inventory of it. And same as the current performance is simply that it's on our website rather that we're delivering. So that's just an example, but it would be really good to just have, you know, if we have a goal where, you know, it might be one a year, one every 2, whatever, it would be good to see just, some smarter targets reflected. And the same if I look at page 46, just around the community, page 46, community events. I wasn't quite sure. There was sort of like a target for Opera in the Park, but not necessarily for other things. And I don't know if the target is satisfaction with the events, or is it attendance, or is it a mix of both? So, if that could be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Next, we've got Kate and then Gal.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Thanks so much. I'm just going to move through page by page and just highlight a little bit of feedback, and if you want to comment as we move through. then that would be great. On page 20 of our agenda, 1.4, I really like that you've said that you'll consider climate change actions to support Council's declaration on the climate emergency. So it's really clearly spelt out there, which is fantastic. I feel like it's not perhaps as reflected throughout the document later, and it could be more. So that's sort of highlighting some of those points as I move through. In terms of the proposed changes, which is 1.8, on page 21, the second bullet point, we talk about entertaining meaningful and inclusive events which contribute to community wellbeing. I think there could be an opportunity to include potentially a sentence there around climate change events or events which educate and consider issues around climate change and how we can mitigate for the effects, plus potentially exploring themes which celebrate a sustainable future. I haven't quite got the words, and I'm happy to work with you on those words, but something in that section there I think would be helpful, as that is part of our 10-year plan. On page 23 through to 25, we talk about how council works with the community, and we look at growing from shared local visions, building from strengths, working with diverse people and sectors, growing collaborative local leadership and learning by doing. I feel like there could be a section in there on improving health and wellbeing outcomes, particularly around mental health. That might be the place where we talk about the role of arts, heritage and events in promoting creativity and play, which support positive mental health outcomes. So I think that's a really important part of why we fund the arts sector. And it might not be quite the right place, so I'm just making suggestions. More than happy for you guys to go away and think about it. And then on the bottom of page 25, again, reflecting, so we've got creating meaningful and entertaining events that contribute to the wellbeing of community. I think we could expand that to talk about sustainability, environment, and educating around how we mitigate for climate change and creating a regenerative future. And then in terms of our partnerships, we have a lot of partnerships, but I think it's called the Art subgroup of the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum. So there's a strong community resiliency, and there's a strong, I think it's called just the Art subgroup, but it might have a longer name. I think that partnership is a key partnership which has been left out. Page 32 of our agenda, 8.24. That sentence doesn't quite make sense grammatically, it just needs a slight tweaking. So we're looking at events which explore the impact of climate change and the impact, I guess, of biodiversity loss in our environment. I think we could maybe have some more examples in terms of how we're mitigating for the effects of climate change in there as well. And page 36 of our agenda, you've picked up on the Vision 2060 at 11.6, which is on page 37. But I just wonder if that's part of our strategic direction and it needs to come a bit sooner in that section, because it's kind of shaping, I'd say it sits in alongside the community outcomes. And I'm sure there's some goals within the Vision 2060 document which align with our arts. And then finally, oh, no, 2 more points through the chair. Oh, no, through you, Matt. 2 more points.
Just 2 more points.
Just 2 more points. Page 49. Under the risk management, we've got a great section on COVID-19, but I think we need a section on climate change, particularly looking at mitigation. So that's how events in arts will change in terms of how we think about our carbon footprint, but also the impact of extreme weather events. We've already of extreme weather events, which we've already seen sometimes affect our event timetable, whether it be fire risk or heavy rainfall. So I think we need to think of that as part of a growing risk in that section there. And then finally, I think it's important that we talk about the role of the arts in terms of creating a low carbon economy, because the arts, creating vocations which are arts based is a really great way of people developing careers which don't have a large carbon footprint. And I think that's important to reflect that in the document somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Very thorough and thoughtful. Next, we've got Gail, followed by Mel, Judine, and then Rohan. Gail.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just going back to page 41 briefly, and that first, the public art, as identified in the Council Arts Policy 2010. Surely we've reviewed it or revised it or brought it up for some sort of update since 2010. If not, when's it due?
Through the chair, so yes, it's still the 2010 arts policy, and we are going to make some minor amendments to reflect the work we've been doing with iwi around arts. That's due, I think we've put it in here somewhere. So yeah, it's not a full review, but we're going to be making some adjustments to that policy to reflect where we are today.
Okay, so have you had any governance input into the 2010, just to if there are any areas that need to be looked at the same time you're doing your iwi update?
Yes, that will be addressed at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then going to page 46, when we had the governance and finance meeting recently, we had the residence survey, and that was rather alarming, looking at the events and the participation rate. And I think there's another residence survey at the moment. So will those two be taken into account before this is coming for finalising?
Yes, sorry, through you, Matt. Yes, they will, and that's part of the will be part of the scope of the review that was proposed for year one, is to look at all the data sources, including the current resident survey. And I'd also like to point out that there's a lot of other data that's now gathered as part of the when council supports an event, participation quality, that sort of thing, which will also be available to guide future decision making.
And one more question, is there going to be any review on the measures between now and when this is, well, all these measures, there's measures all over the place. So level of service measures, targets, current performance. Because as a result of the resident survey, I think we need to keep an eye on what are we measuring the right thing, and are we doing the right things? Because my take from the resident survey that we got was that we're not, particularly in the event space. And I think I mentioned at that meeting, should we be looking at other types of things? Because it doesn't seem that the participation that we were hoping for is actually evident. So I'm just wondering how are we going to address what we do? Is there a review on what we're doing, or are you going to wait for the second round of the resident survey before you do that? But I think it needs to be done.
I think Axel might have something to add to that. Hi, Axel. Kia ora, Axel.
Kia ora, yes, so the questions in the resident survey are going to be reviewed. And so there'll be new questions for in the LTP. So that's Mark Goether, who is managing the relationship with or putting this together. So Currently, the resident surveys questions we have are from the previous, I think, previous 6 years LTP or something like this. So this is the last year where we're going to have these questions. If you remember, I was a bit frustrated by the results, and that is because probably at some stage we must have taken the percentage or the threshold, the benchmark, at a time where, I don't know, the event was new or was mega attendance, and that became the benchmark. When you do a calculation of the attendance levels, they're still relatively good, but they're not as good as when they're at the peaking point. Nonetheless, in order to have a different set of data, we're also surveying the events themselves. And we get quality feedback, we get coordinator appraisal, performance appraisal, etc. So that we have different parameters that help us to actually have a better understanding of what is the value of the event for the community.
That just raised another question, Matt.
And what is that question, Gail?
I thought that the resident survey was actually new. No, it was just a different, so it was certainly a different format. The one we got recently. It looked very different.
Those questions have been quite long-standing, the events ones, as far as I can remember. But to address your earlier question, we've budgeted to do an events review in year 1, which will address some of the concerns you've got, I think.
Okay, and I think what might be helpful is that if we're doing like exit interviews, if you like, from events, maybe we need to, because what we got recently was a snapshot. It was just we got 400 people or something. So it doesn't help sort of on its own somewhat. But if you bring us the numbers of people attending, I think that would give us some comfort. And put it into some sort of perspective.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Mel.
Thank you, Matt. Janine,
Yeah.
I just perhaps go, you are allowing enough in this plan to sort of cater for increase in local visitation, I'm thinking, or New Zealand-wide visitations to our heritage assets. I'm just hoping that you're allowing enough funding for that, because I think there's going to be a significant increase in visitations from here on in. And I just want to know that your budgeting has got that front of mind.
Thank you, Mel. Obviously, the impact of COVID will mean we have more visitors from our own country, which is exciting. And it's a good opportunity for us to market to that sector. The budgets reflect similar, in terms of the heritage facilities, similar to previously, with some additional support to implement the founder's strategy.
I'd like to see that increased somewhat, but anyway, yes. All right, I'll move off that. I just want to take an opportunity, and I'm not going to apologise, Matt, for doing this, but on page 11, I've just had some communication recently from the community about this. Just let me see where it is. I say page 11. No, that can't be it. It's to do with the Railway Society. You mentioned that there. What page is it on? I can't just find it at the moment. Where?
Oh, was it here? Page 11 of that?
Yes, that's right. Page 11 of that, somewhere here.
So page 28.
Yes, it is. Page 28, and it's mentions there that it's a key, oh yes, here it is, Railway Society, is a key visitor attraction. So I think we need to talk about that. You've mentioned it, a key visitor attraction at Founders. And so the one issue that's come to me recently is they're applying for resource consent. I don't want to go off track, but I'm just going to.
By the way, I like what you did there, talking about railways and talking about going off track.
I thought, oh. They are having trouble, frustrations around a resource consent. Can you play a part in that in some way, please? They've invested 300,000.
Thank you, Mel. At this point, it's up to the Railway Society to do the application and approach council if they want to seek further support towards that.
Yes, okay, that seems very formal. We're not being very formal today. We're just going to say, can you give them a hand? Could you give them a...
Sarah to come forward to give a bit of an update on how we,
Right.
keep in touch with the...
It didn't read well in the local press, that's all.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. No, it didn't. And I do touch base with them regularly about what their plans are. So they have been seeking advice from FRONS, which is the the National Federation of Railways in New Zealand. So they've been seeking advice, but they also have a lot of other projects on at the moment as well. So the last time I spoke to them, it wasn't a priority for them. They had other projects that they were working on. I'm hopeful that they'll come back to it, but bearing in mind that it is likely to be an expensive exercise with no guarantee of success, then I think that probably dampens their enthusiasm for pursuing that at the moment.
No success, excuse me, through you. No success in getting a resource consent, is that what you're saying?
Sorry, it's not guaranteed. So they would have to provide quite a lot of information. And I'm not an expert on that information.
Yes, well, as my colleague next door to me said, can we provide them with some, and that's the question I started with actually.
Can we help them?
Can we help them? Help, H-E-L-P. No, that was, that was
we need to help
that was the thrust of my question when I asked it. I just, 300,000 of donations from the community.
Mel, Roger's got some thoughts.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Matt. So there's a long background to the conversation with the society, and I'll let Sarah fill you in on any details that I might not have been involved in myself. But just in the last 2 years, I've been involved in meetings with them where we've also had the consents team involved, providing them with advice on how you go about the process and what the pros and cons are, the potential costs. They've also, as Sarah said, searching out advice from their fellow societies around New Zealand through their national association. I think we feel that we've leaned as far forward as we can to give the advice that we have available to us on this subject. But the next steps are with them. If council was to do more and offer more, that's not provided for in this AMP, but if that was a desire by the council, then that could be a decision or a discussion for the workshops in December. So, yeah, that's where we're at the moment. We do feel that through Sarah's relationship, which is a very good and close one with them, we have involved the compliance team to give as much advice as we can previously. At this point, the ball is in their court whether they want to go down this path because there is some risk and cost involved.
Thank you for that, Roger. It's just the point that, as I said earlier, it is a key, and Sarah, you've identified this, it's a key visitor attraction, and therefore we should try and give them all the help we can because of that very fact, to draw people in. So I'm going to be a little bit bold and say I'd also like us to start thinking about extending the track too. I know it. Some might gasp, not around this table, but in the community may. I don't think so though. I think extending the track too in small steps would be a well-received action. Have you got a comment on that?
I would need to discuss that with the Railway Society and see if there's actually something that they want to pursue.
Can't hear that, sorry.
Sorry, I need to
pull the microphone a bit closer, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd need to discuss that with the Railway Society to see if that's actually something they have the appetite for at the moment.
Yes.
They obviously did start down that track a good number of years ago before I was involved, when they originally wanted to extend the track and bring it over Trafalgar Street. My understanding is that it ended up in the environmental court and they lost, which probably makes them nervous this time around as well.
Yes, I still think there's a role for us to do whatever we can to promote a key visitor attraction. Doesn't matter how high the hurdle, doesn't really matter. Every day is a new day. what you couldn't achieve yesterday, you may well be able to achieve today. And I just think to let it sit dormant and say, well, it's up to them, and then we admit it's a key attraction, well, we've got to do something, I think. Now I've lost my train of thought on all the other items.
You've done it again.
Train of thought, that's right.
Hey,
Did you just say that? Like, you didn't say that on purpose.
No,
no, you did. Pretend you did. Pretend you did. I think, Mel, you raised some really good points, and obviously there's been a lot of conversation in the community about it. And I'm sure those points have been taken on board. Have you spoken to the Railway Society yourself? Have you had a good chat to them?
I often, because my grandfather drove the train from Glenhope to Nelson in that particular model that they have just.
Okay, interesting.
So it has a close connection with me.
Sure. All right, thank you, Mel. Next on my list, I've got Judine, then Rohan, then Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I'll just start with adding to Mel's comments. The proposed changes to the NPS air quality will not make their application any easier. So if they do want an application, I'd be getting it in before the changes. I just wanted to go to partnerships on page 26, and sort of a key partner that I felt was maybe missing was like Multicultural Nelson Tasman. There's a real, it just felt like there was a bit of an absence of multiculturalism throughout the event strategy. And we know that a lot of the events that Multicultural Nelson Tasman and other cultural groups run, again, really enrich our community, add great diversity. So just in the partnership section, but then also maybe if you could reflect through the document that multiculturalism. And then on page 32, you mentioned for Isle House an improved website focused on visitor attractions. And this is just maybe more of a suggestion or something. I just wondered if you'd thought about something more like a heritage website, rather than, you know, the more we send people to different places, the harder it is. And, you know, we could have, you know, a great website that has Broad Greenhouse, Isle House, Melrose, you know, maybe founders. But then it could also like link to the Prow and all of their great stories, and to the Wakapuaka Cemetery, which is also part of our heritage network. And yeah, so just if we're enhancing one, can we look at, you know, what the sort of the broader needs are, and then just noting that the sustainable development goals haven't been reflected in here, and would need to be reflected in the final version. Thank you.
Thank you, Judine. Rohan.
Sorry, my mind's just been occupied with train puns. Bringing it back. Keeping steaming ahead.
Yes.
I know that we discussed, and I think it was through the Taonga Tuku Iho strategy workshop around an audit of public art, and I don't see this reflected in here. Is it coming through that strategy?
Through Matt.
To me.
To you.
Say Rohan, yeah.
Basically, we're looking at doing that under our current work program rather than through future work. So that's going to be taking place regardless.
Great, very exciting. And then just looking at page, well, it's covered in a few places. We're obviously doing the review of our events and how those are operated. In terms of that review, what kind of scope are you looking at, and what kind of approach are you looking at taking for that? Are we talking in-house, external?
So the thinking at this stage, and we're at very early stages of doing that, is that it would be have an external involvement, and that we would be seeking feedback and input from a wide range of those connected with events, both internally and externally, as that scope is developed. But we're at very early stages of that.
Okay. And then just looking at this establishment of the sort of whole of Nelson venues website, very exciting. Is that sort of coming along with the creation of a collective brand or broader things? Just someone to come speak to that?
Stu can answer those off the top of his head.
Welcome, Stu.
All employed to get Stu to the table.
Thank you. Great question. The venues website will incorporate the venues branding that we had created a couple of years ago. So we have venues branding for our heritage venues, for our premium venues, and for our sporting venues as well. So the new website will incorporate, all of those venues and not only showcase, what's on, but also showcase the venues as a space for hire as well.
Cool. And then I guess a more sort of high level and broad question looking at this AMP, how are we sort of turning our minds? I know it does pop up in a few places and we've certainly received a fair bit of feedback about turning towards more of a delivery focus and how we can focus on as much on the delivery aspect of things as possible. Is that sort of reflected through the AMP? And
can you clarify? Can you give me an example?
So in terms of, especially with our on the ground staff spending as much time going out and working on activation and making things happen in those three spaces.
Okay. So you're talking about actual operational delivery?
Yeah.
Yep. So yes, this sets out sort of the strategic direction and the levels of service. In terms of actual hands-on delivery, there's a mixture of work that gets contracted out and hands-on delivery by staff, depending on what the work is.
Okay, I guess from my perspective, I think I'd quite like to see at a strategic level a focus on how we can get as much sort of bang for our buck out in this area and how we can best improve our sort of efficiencies in delivery.
So just further from Shanine's comments, one of the best ways or most effective ways, given the relatively small amount of resource that council is available on, is through effective partnerships. And this document reflects that. Actually, the best way is develop strong partners, support them, remove the barriers they've got to doing the stuff that they're expert at, and create an environment where they can be successful. And that's a really big part of what's in this particular AMP.
And then just finally, I see where there's sort of discussion around implementing a new framework for reviewing events and things like that. I'm just wondering whether any thought's been given to, obviously, with the restructure, we're going to have a larger, the committee's going to be looking at a larger range of things, how we're going to continue to ensure, whether your mind's gone to it yet, how we continue to ensure good sort of governance, drive and input throughout this area of council's work.
Part of it is recognising the points that have already been made, which is about having effective levels of service and that they are targeted to what council sees as critical measures of success. So if you set good goals, then you can receive the outcome of that and be reassured that we're actually delivering what we should be delivering in terms of council. Part of it will be through the quarterly report, so you can and will continue to receive updates through that mechanism, and there's always the opportunity to put more detail in there, specifically around events. One of the things that I guess sits to the side of this also is just making sure that our internal communication around what's happening in the events world is working well, both in the public sector and to you as elected representatives. That's really critical. It's become increasingly important given the way that events are ping-ponging around in the particular environment and will remain so.
Yes. Back to you.
Thanks, Rohan. Thanks, Mark. Mark, can you just pull that microphone a little bit closer to the two of you, or either of you? That'd be great. Thank you. I've got Tim, then I want to see if our Zoomers are keen to ask some questions, and then Mel.
Very quickly, I thought Mel made some very good points on the topic. But no, just in touch on that, and like me, being in contact with Bob Murray from the Railway Society and others down there, and Saveco, what was raised by Mel on that. But I think it was more of a case of it's like saying the air quality and compliance, and I've had some chats, even going back a few years with Claire Barton on that, and seeing what the appetite is of the Railway Society to overcome those junctions and for us to signal an emphasis on that. But thank you for your alignment and thoughts there, Councillor Cornet.
I think you need to turn your microphone on when you say things like that, Brian. Say it again. Okay, the moment's gone. I'm just thinking about the viewers at home. You know, why should they miss out? Thank you very much, Tim. So I just want to see if Rachel or Yvonne on Zoom have got any questions they'd like to ask. They know, they're good. All right, thank you. Next on the list, I've got Mel.
Thanks, Matt. I've got to page 59 and it's about events. And once again, I'm sort of hesitant to raise it, but I want to. Santa Parade, that event. Mr. Chair, you sound as though you're candid, but anyway, I won't go further than that. I want to know if our events team have had any communications with Murray Leaning. Now, he works for Mitre 10, and that's my favourite store.
That is a very nice product placement and good to know.
Yes, and I understand he's wanting to bring the businesses together in Nelson to have a Santa Parade. So can we in any way assist him with that?
We don't have any specifics of what is being proposed or requested, and wouldn't be in a position to answer that.
It's still very hard to hear, but
we don't have any specific requests from Mr. Leaning or any other group around that question.
Axel, have you had any contact with him?
Well, he was basically posting on Facebook the intention to pull it off himself. So that was a private initiative. So, I mean, like any other community group or member of the public who decides to pull off an event on their own, that's his doing, and then he has to follow the process. So we haven't been involved in that. We are focusing on delivering Christmas in Nelson. That's plenty on our plates, to be honest, and quite exciting as well. So we just leave it up to him to follow his idea.
Yes, you wouldn't discourage it, though, would you? No, because of course you wouldn't.
No, and to be honest, most of the parades in the country are delivered by community. Yeah. Most of them.
That's correct.
It's quite a rarity that council deliver events, and it wasn't a fact. In fact, it wasn't the case before the trust folded.
Yeah.
So if someone out there decides that you know they have the capacity to do it, go for it. Totally, go for it.
Yeah. Thank you. Because Richmond, for example, the business community have run that for decades. The Richmond businessmen have run that for 23 years. Mm. I've been closely associated with that, so I know that. And all the council have to do is sweep the roads afterwards and give them a bit of road closure assistance, and that's it. So I thought, well, this person, if he's got the desire and businesses want to support him, we should say, yes, go for it. And so you are actually saying that, aren't you? You're saying go for it. If he wants
I mean, he's in contact with Roading anyway to look into that, so that's a bit out of my sphere, but he's in contact with the right team to negotiate road closure. Yeah. Just this morning I learned that Rotorua is cancelling their Santa Parade, so yeah, so there's all sorts of options for members of the public to take initiative.
Thank you. The other one is Christmas decorations. Now, no, I know you're laughing and smiling, but the community don't want them up 2 weeks before Christmas. They want them up as soon as possible, please. They say in other years we've been too late. Now, I'm not being negative. I'm just the messenger here. I'm just telling you a very strong view in the community is that we put our Christmas decorations up too late. We've got to lift our standard of Christmas tree and the standard of decorations generally. Now, that's what the community is telling me. So, Axel, I hope you just take
some good news here, Mel. Some good news. They'll be up early December. So by the 9th of December, they'll be up. If not before, there is some logistics involved. It's not like something that Axel walks up on the ladder and puts it up. It's a little bit more comprehensive. but they're going to look fantastic. What we're looking at is a 3-year plan because we've been through COVID. There's been a few financial changes, so we adapted. But we have a mix of it's going to be a real tree, so that's some real how do you call it? Well, not plastic. There we go. And some sustainable ones. So we built up a stock of Christmas decoration that over time is going to enhance the city centre and spread out really beautifully.
Great news.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mel. Will.
Thank you. I'm not entirely sure about my questioning privileges, so I've just got 2 questions, both purely on the basis of curiosity. First of all, this may be a little controversial. I'm just going back to the trains. On what basis is the railway considered a key visitor attraction? I'm asking just because I don't know anyone who has ever, at any point in their life.
Sarah can come down, but it relates to it being a key attraction for Founders Heritage Park itself.
Right, okay.
And
not necessarily in the Nelson
when the
region.
train's running, you'll see plenty of youngsters down there keen as to go on a giant big train. But Sarah, please.
Yeah, there will be people, particularly local families, who will come in specifically to ride the train. So it's a good tourist activity, but also it is appreciated by our families with young children who love to do a ride on the train.
Good question, though. Will.
Thank you for that. And my second one was, in the spirit of discussing parades, has there been any discussion in the AMP for the events around the possibility of in 2021 or in 2022 working towards a Pride Parade in Nelson? Pride Parade. Yes, Rainbow Pride Parade. I'm assuming not.
Okay. As part of the review, it's not just about looking at what is the current suite of events, but what are the opportunities that are out there? What are the spaces where the sector is already well served? So why would council want to do it if someone else is doing it? And if there are specific opportunities and needs, for example, the Rainbow Pride Parade, it's something we should look at.
Excellent. Thanks, Will. All right. I don't think we've had any other people waving at me, so I think we're getting to the end of questions. Would anyone be prepared to move thank you, Judine, the recommendation seconded by Kate, the recommendation that Community Services Committee receives the report, approves the draft Arts, Heritage and Events Activity Management Plan, and notes that the draft Arts, Heritage and Events Management Plan will be updated and the final Activity Management Plan approved after the adoption of the long-term plan. Do we have any debate? Oh, you have a question, Gail? Sure.
Sorry, Matt.
No worries.
Look, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to Christmas decorations because there's some word out in the community that we can't locate the flags, which are the 12 days of Christmas, and I'm expecting the second round, like we've got the first round, which we had, I think, the first 5 days of Christmas or something, and we're supposed to have the next lot. So that's the first question. And the other word around town, which is probably completely what do you call it? Not conspiracy,
urban legend.
Oh, one of those things.
Myth.
Fake news probably will do. That we're getting plastic holly. So I just want that put to bed because that's just yeah, a rumour, nasty rumour.
We love details here at Community
Yeah, sorry, but it's not my question. It's people have been talking to me, and I said, look, I haven't got a clue. Sorry.
Thanks, Gail.
Derail.
Excellent.
No, we've located the flags. So that's they were super well stored, and it's a bit like looking in a teenager's bedroom to find a telephone. No, telephone would be easy, but the socks. So we just we located them, and so they will be reutilized with some new ones with a Kiwiana flair. I just don't want to spill all the beans because they're an element of surprise.
No.
We talked with a lot of people and worked also closely with Uniquely Nelson, Community Artworks, School of Music, Cinti Center Retail Group that Alan Gray hosts regularly. So really, there's a plan in place. it may not be looking like Northern Hemisphere, but then it's dark at 4 p.m. So we have to take that into consideration, because some people want lights all over the place, but it gets dark at 9:30. What's the point? So focusing on building up something that is sort of vernacular, exciting, and over time spreads across the city. And there will be some reusable items, and that's where, if they're made of vegetation. I missed the word.
Organic?
No, not plastic. What's
organic?
Organic. Yeah, thank you. That would be. And well, no, I have my. It doesn't look good on camera, does it? I'm not going to stand up again. What was I? Yeah, so there's going to be some really, really cool items, and they're reusable. And to be reusable, they need to be robust. It's an investment, long-time investment, but it's going to pay off. And others are organic, and they'll also satisfy that visual experience organic stuff that's going to be up. So, for instance, the Christmas tree is not going to be 4 weeks before, because that's the challenge with organic. We want it to look really good as we come closer to Christmas. So some items will come later. It's all really staged, and it will spread out.
Sounds good. Gal's nodding. She says, sounds good.
I'm happy. Thank you. Thank you.
Gal's happy.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Gal's happy. I'm happy. Just for that, Mel. Just for that, Mel. Just for that, Mel.
Axel, just before we go.
Hang on, Mel.
When you use the word robust,
Sorry, Mel. Mel. Sorry. Buddy. There is a speaking order, and I'm going to go to Pete. I think he might want to talk about the same thing, then I'll come back to you. Pete.
Oh, yo, Matt. I'm down with your sick changes to meeting protocol.
Hey, respect.
There was some suggestion by Councillor. Well, are we debating? Or
no, we're just. I think Mel has another question, and then we're going to go.
Okay. Well, I'll.
Do you want to wait?
I'll defer through you, Matt.
Thank you, Pete. You don't need to do that. You can just chill, bro. Mel.
Well, I've got to ask the question again. I don't want Father Christmas. We're having one.
Yeah.
Oh, we do have one. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful Santa Grotto. Father Christmas is booked in.
Yep.
And he'll be delivering.
Right in the central city.
How's he getting into the country?
Sorry?
That'll be good, Mel.
How's he getting into the country?
He arrives early for quarantine.
Yeah.
It'll be. He didn't tell us. Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite secretive.
Mr. Chair, do you think we should have some comms on this?
We've had heaps.
Yeah.
Quarantining centre.
About what we're doing for Christmas?
Yeah, about Father Christmas.
Yeah, we've had heaps.
Yeah, press
I think we'll do it
release.
again because people want to know.
Okay, well, we did.
I can answer that too.
Yeah.
I'm on a roll. We had a press release. Matt, you spoke to radio. So we have a regular press release that will unveil a little bit more of what's going to happen to build up the suspense. But bear in mind, we're still in October.
Yep.
So building suspense over 8 weeks is a little bit, has to be, you can't have a press release every week. So
And
we really want to bring some new stuff to the public. So it's promoted regularly through press release, media release, Uniquely Nelson's website, and our Facebook page when we come closer.
thanks. It's also what we're doing in partnership with Uniquely Nelson, and they are publicising it as well.
I think we're going to keep it rolling though, right up to the day.
Okay.
As you say, build the excitement.
Catherine, do you hear that? Yep, Catherine's onto it too. Excellent. All right, so I think that concludes questions, debate. Pete would like to debate. Put your hand up if you'd like to debate. Pete, the floor is, we've moved and seconded the recommendations. Pete.
Thanks. We're accepting or not an asset management plan. I think we have to be extremely careful to make sure we draw the distinction between providing guidance to staff and suggesting content of some of the things that we are actually looking at. And in particular, I just want to question Councillor Kate's suggestion that we might want to look at doing an event that celebrates climate change or whatever. I think we need to, and I fully accept the fact that the council's declared a climate emergency and many of the things that entails. However, I do not think that this council table is the place to generate content regarding events or to generate the theme of an event. That should come from the community itself, and we should facilitate suggestions that come, entertain them, work out ways of supporting them. It's not up to us to generate that. And I think we have to be really careful that we are seen by the public to facilitate, not to necessarily generate content, if that's a very basic way of saying it. Similarly, and I reflect on Councillor Courtney's comments about Christmas activities, whether it be a Santa parade or Santa himself or trees or decorations or whatever. It is kind of refreshing to see a little bit of discussion today about the community getting more involved as opposed to council necessarily taking the lead step in that regard. And I think that signals a really strong and robust attitude towards those things.
Thank you, Pete. Anyone else like to debate? Judine?
Look, I just want to echo some of the things Pete said. Look, events for community groups is often such a great fundraising opportunity for them. And so I always think council needs to be really careful. So, really happy to see the review, because some of the spaces we've been in historically are ones that are led by community in other areas. And I think we need to be mindful of those fundraising opportunities for other groups as well, because that can be their bread and butter. And if council comes along and delivers, it actually undermines the community rather than builds the community, which is the whole purpose of sort of what we're doing in this area, is to build and support our community. Just want to thank the staff for the work they've done so far. Cheers.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your contributions to the debate. Thank you very much to all the staff who have been at the table talking to us about what we're doing and where we're heading. It looks good to me. And so I'm now going to put it, all those in favour, say aye. Those against, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. So we're going to take a break now for 10 minutes, and then we're going to be back to talk about the fabulous feature of the city known as Founders Heritage Park. And we'll be back let's come back at 1:05. So a little bit more than 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. A number of us have observed that the chair pottles are not exactly racing out the door, but I can recommend them if you chuck a bunch of fruit on top, give it a stir. It's pretty nice.
Can I endorse it? Will that help?
Go for it, Tim. Yep. As endorsed by Tim.
His pies are craft.
I know. You know that's kind of messing with your whole brand, pies and lime milkshakes. It's a day of change. Why not? Hey, so we've next got item 4 on the agenda, the Founders Heritage Park Strategic Plan. And the person who knows all about Founders is Sarah Newman-Watt, who's going to join us and give us, before we get into the strategic plan, a little bit of a recap on the Founders Book Fair, which has been the talk of the town.
Who came?
There you go.
Excellent. So we had an amazing book fair. It was actually, because it was warmer than usual, it had a really lovely vibe and felt quite relaxed, and made a record-breaking total. So we made $157,000 this year, which is huge. We had slightly fewer visitors. We had, I think, about 11,000 this time. But the quality of the books that had been donated were amazing. So obviously they sold for a bit more than the kind of really tatty paperbacks, which were also available. People obviously went away with even more books and most of the jigsaw puzzles. So that was fantastic. So,
good to hear. Any thoughts so far coming from the organising committee about the dates and the future?
They're talking about that tomorrow. So I think they're pretty split between Queen's birthdays traditionally when book fair has been, and also it's a time of year when there's not a lot else on in Nelson. But they all really appreciated the warm weather, no frost, and being able to go home in the daylight. So, and I think the visitors enjoyed it too. They came later in the day. They probably stayed longer because it wasn't freezing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice.
So it's up for debate. We'll see what happens.
Very good. Okay. Well, congratulations to everyone involved in making it happen. And, it was a shame to postpone it, but we got there in the end, and fantastic to get a record result. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so now we are talking about the Founders Heritage Park Strategic Plan, and Sarah's going to talk us through it.
Hi again.
Hi.
So with me today, I've got my wing woman, Shanine.
Nice.
And also I've got Mahina Marshall, who is our Heritage and Collections Officer. So she will. So we are here today seeking approval for the Founders Heritage Parks strategic plan and also the collection policy. A strategic plan is needed for the park to provide clear direction and inform investment decisions going forward. So the journey to where we've got to today started back in 2017 when a wide range of stakeholders provided feedback for a SWOT analysis as strengths and weaknesses of the park. The strategic plan has been workshopped by council twice. First time was back in 2018 and again earlier this year in June. The 5 focus areas were approved by council back in April 2019. And so from that, the plan has been put together and we have sought feedback from the Whakatu Marae Committee and also tenants of the park. So hopefully you've read it. And ready for questions.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll start with Mel.
I can just find a couple that I want to ask at the moment. I'll come back to you if I can find the others. Sarah, I'm looking at 5.15, 63, page 63, and you're talking about here about the collection can be complete, rationalisation, that's it, of the collection can be completed using existing budget and staffing allocations, but this will take a number of years to complete, which poses some risks. So there's a couple of questions coming out of that, but I just, that will be difficult for you if it takes a number of years to complete this work. I know you've got a part-time temporary worker working on at the moment, but she's got an inordinate amount of work to do. And is there any way we can speed this up? That's my first question.
Obviously, it could be sped up, but that would take more resource.
Well, should we be considering that, do you think? Would you like us to consider that? Because, and how much resource would it take? I mean, how many years is it likely to take? This is one part-time lady.
Pass over to Mahina for that, because this is really her field, and she'll have a better idea of what has been completed so far, and an idea of maybe how much longer it will take. Kia ora koutou. So you went to the tour, Mel, and you saw the state. So the planning that we've done based on the EKE that we had, the report that was done by Te Papa's consultant, was that we needed to do a reorg, and a reorg is a process where we rationalise, we look at what we've got, and then put a plan forward, which we've done. Unfortunately, part of going forward is that we don't know what we have. The documentation over the years has been poor. So the first part of the process is inventorying everything that we've got, and we've got a contractor in there now doing a component of that. But as Sarah said, with the current resource, it will be a slow process, and I see it taking a number of years at this point.
Can you get some figures on the numbers? You know how many she's gone through and how many?
Yeah. So Shanine's just asked about numbers. Our current records say that we have about 4,000 objects. We have a lot more than that. Probably, I would estimate well over 20,000. I'd estimate. I mean, it's really hard to tell because there's no numbers of what's on display in each individual display. In the collection store, we're estimating about 12,000 objects, and the contractor has got up to about 900, and she's been there for almost 6 months.
How much longer is she staying for?
She finishes at the end of November.
Are there any plans to replace through you? Any plans to replace? Are you providing in this?
We are currently out of budget for any for the remainder of this financial year.
Kate said that's an issue, isn't it? Is that an issue?
It means that the project will be on hold until we have some more resource that we can put towards it.
Another question, I'm just wondering how closely in relation to the collection and so forth are you working with Tasman Bay's Heritage Trust? Are you working in lockstep with them, or do you have a close working relationship with them?
With the museum, yeah, we do. Our current contractor used to work for them, and I work with the collections lead there quite closely. We collaborate on quite a lot of projects, and she works also in an advisory capacity to us. And when we ever have any questions, or if we have objects that we're not sure what to do with, she comes in and helps. So we do work closely with them, yes. Yeah.
That's all for the time being.
Thanks, Mel. Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just a question. I'm just trying to sort of unpick that. You know, you talk about one of the strategies is an iwi partnership. I'm just looking at some of the commentary through the document. It seems to be the relationship we've got with the marae and probably tangata whenua and iwi is fragmented or problematic. I'm just wondering, can you sort of describe how we're going to incorporate sort of a meaningful iwi partnership? So, because the way it looks, you've got the Whakatū marae doing their thing, you've got the park doing their thing, and the twain shall never meet. It seems like that.
So the one of the key actions for building iwi partnerships is that shared cultural space, and that will be a joint project between the marae and founders. So we'll be working closely together on that, and then also we will be looking for feedback and advice from Te Ahurea as well. So so we have I suppose an access to a route to iwi through that forum.
So you would describe you're more at the beginning of the relationship.
So no, the Tohunanui Ahuria has obviously been going for a little while now, and obviously we have always had a very good relationship with the marae next door. But up to this stage, it has been collaboratively through Kai Festival has been the key time that we come together. But we see an opportunity to expand that.
I'll just add to that as well, Brian. So through the process of developing this draft strategy, we've also met with the marae themselves as well, the committee, and as Sarah mentioned, through the Te Ohutoi Ahurea Forum. The discussion around the cultural parks has been going on for a number of years. This strategy allows us to actually make headway, apply for funding and get the project underway. So it's certainly going well, I think, in that regard.
Well, that is good to hear. Brian, you got any other questions?
No, I just
okay. Thanks, Rachel.
Kia ora, Matt. Shanine and Sarah, just following on from the questions from Brian around the relationship with the marae and founders. I'm just looking at what's in the document, and I'm not sure that it probably captures what it needs to at this point, because the August meeting with the marae committee was left with the desire for further engagement. And I'm just wondering if that further engagement has happened. So
there was another meeting. We didn't attend it, but we have been sent some feedback from them. So we did. The committee requested that that they have a separate meeting, but that didn't eventuate, and I was sent some feedback that had come from them.
I want to summarise the key points from that.
Yeah, so the key points, that the feedback that was received is in the report, and it was around there was support for the cultural space. They wanted it to be imposing. The feeling that the Founders has its own history and the marae has its own history, and they both need to be celebrated. And there is a feeling that obviously iwi want to keep control of their stories. So that's something that we need to be very mindful of if we want to include any iwi stories kind of in the wider park.
thanks, Sarah. I just think it might be, we should see what's in the document as a work in progress, the start of a conversation. So there was quite a desire to come back and meet again and just explore those matters that you've summarised. And I think just for the committee, the marae has the marae is, is a it's the spiritual heart of the city from the perspective of the marae committee, and it has, in terms of the distinction of our tonga, our heritage, our stories, their spaces for the marae holds its own space in terms of the whakapapa. So and equally so does Founders have the heritage stories to tell. So I think we just need to be probably exploring that a little bit more as to how the interface works, and actually, and Sarah, thank you for recognising the importance of maintaining the importance of ownership, because I think that was really important in those initial discussions. But there's certainly quite a lot more to discuss, and the marae is in the process of going through. We're working on our development plan as well. So there's lots more good kōrero to be had.
Yeah, and I think one of the really terrific events that we have every year in the city is the Kai Festival, and that is something. I mean, it sounds like there's lots of work to be done, but the fact that the marae and Founders make that happen together, I think, is a very good sign of where we're heading. Does anyone else have any questions? Mel.
Thank you, Matt. To Sarah, on page 80, I'm looking at the financial plan. And I'm going down to staff operating expenditure. On page 80 it is. and I'm looking at programming staff, venue staff, curatorial staff, those items there. I really want to know why you're introducing funding sort of in 3 years' time there. You're introducing 35,000 and setting it in place for about 3 years, and then goes up to 70 for the programming staff. You're doing the same for the venue staff. You've got nothing budgeted for the year 2021, 22 or 2022, 23. Why is that?
Roger steps up to the plate.
Thanks, Mel. Look, I think if the team we're left with their area alone, they'd love to see that staffing come earlier and for there always to be more resources available. We are operating in a highly constrained financial environment for the council overall, in particular the OPEX constraints on council's budget for the first 3 years of the AMP are frankly extremely severe, and you're going to have some pretty difficult trade-offs and decisions to consider when you come to the workshops in December. With that in mind, the staff are doing their best to be prudent and to offer to spread the workload and the risk in a sensible way. And obviously it's always going to be open to the council to take a different view, to change the timing and the flow, and that'll be in your hands. But to answer your question, there isn't an absolute right or wrong way to do it, but we are trying to work within some very heavy financial constraints at the moment.
Yes, it looks to me, thanks for that, Roger. It looks to me as though they're only a part-time person there for the program staff and for the venue staff, the same, possibly a full-time for the curatorial staff, but that's most urgent. The curatorial staff there at the, yes, I did, Mahina, I did go on the tour and I thoroughly enjoyed it with other councillors. It was most informative and it was so obvious to me. The state of the collection, the chaos, and it's not a reflection on our staff at the moment, it's just been building up over years. The state of the collection, the chaos, not knowing what we've got, and here's this poor woman working her soul out, finishing at Christmas, and there's going to be nothing there in the financial plan. I see curatorial staff for another 2 years. It starts in 2023, 24, and it's going to be a horrendously big job for them to pick up and try and work through. So even if Roger brought it in another year, even if we just had a breather this year, because I agree with you, next year is going to be, it's an unknown, isn't it? But even if we did it for the 22, 23 year, just drew it instead of pulled it back. Yeah. Anyway, I leave that. It's an observation that I have. Could I go back to where I started from on page 63, 5.15 in regards to this collection and the recording of it and so forth that's going on? And you say it'll take a number of years, and we've discussed that. Then you say, and you didn't answer this one, you said, and it says here in your strategy that it poses some risks. What are the risks associated with not getting this job done? This is 5.15. You said it'll take a number of years to complete. This is the identifying and recording of the collection.
Okay, so there's further deterioration that can happen to the collection. Environmental risks and increasing. Unfortunately, the degradation of the collection is ongoing. Objects are being impacted, and if we were to have a major environmental or a fire, environmental hazard, a fire, a climate event, there could be significant risk.
So it would be in the interests of the Founders Heritage Park and everyone involved in it to have it done as quickly as possible. That's the sort of what I'm reading from that. Am I putting words into your mouth, or is that?
Maybe I should let Shanine and Sarah answer that.
The other risk is around the people that have donated the items. We've discussed that before as well in respect of you know, at the moment, some of those items are sitting there, but we may not even know who the donor is. But yeah, there is a lot of work that needs doing. In response to your question, we have put in the plan as well as we can to relate to the long-term plan and to fit in with, you know, where we are today.
Thanks, Mel. Just checking, Judine told me that she'd given you a question. Was that included in your questions?
No, you've already been asked.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, next we've got Rachel and then Kate.
Thanks, Matt. I just want to follow on from Mel's questions because I think they're really important given some of our statutory responsibilities in terms of the role of local government and our role particularly in relation to museums, to heritage. Are there funding, are there funding sources that we can be applying to help progress this work more quickly? Are there any avenues that we could go to? Thanks, Nina.
In terms of COVID funding, there were some emergency measures put up by the Ministry for Culture and Heritage, but unfortunately, because we're a council-funded operation, there's nothing that we can apply to there. But in terms, I mean, there's none that I'm aware of. I mean, we can investigate further, and that's something we can come back to you with. But at this point, I'm not aware of any. Are you, Sinead?
It's a challenging environment around funding for this type of activity because it's not a new or exciting project. I'm actually due to meet with Chris Chews, our new fundraising advisor, and we'll be bringing this up as a something for him to look into for options.
Mahina, is this an issue for councils across New Zealand? Is this a, you know, because if it's something where because of the way the funding structures are set up, we've got collections throughout New Zealand held by councils that are really needing, you know, the work that's been set out by Te Papa in giving that guidance. If this is happening everywhere, then maybe this is something we need to raise in a different forum. Is it a general issue, or is it something that is?
Well, yeah, heritage is across New Zealand is in a pretty dire situation, like you said. But yeah, I mean, Wellington Museums is they do a really great job, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, I don't have any specific information.
No, that's right. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I think I just need to go and have a little bit of a think about that because it really, I think Mel's questions, it really concerns me that what we're hearing from Mahina around, you know, the risk here does really concern me. It's, you know, we have a duty to our community and those who have, whose treasures we're taking care of to look after them properly. And I'm probably inclined as Mel is to move that funding forward. We can have that discussion in December, but I think in the interim, maybe we just have to also be having a conversation around actually how heritage is funded in Aotearoa and this exclusion for local authorities, when in fact it is a fundamental part of our role as a local authority. You know, it's sitting in our statute, but it's a collective responsibility. So maybe we need to see a stronger partnership between government and local government around heritage. I'll go and have a think about that.
I feel the same way. I also think that if the work gets done, there'll be a lot of stuff which doesn't stay at the park, and actually getting that out of the park sooner rather than later would be very helpful. I'm going to Kate and then Tim.
Thank you, Matt. Look, I think that needs to be, and I know we've already dealt with the draft AMP, but I think that risk needs to be really clearly reflected on page 49 of the draft AMP in the risk management as well. It's partly articulated, but can we just make sure that that's spelled out more clearly, Janine? I'm sure it's just an oversight on your part that these are big documents, and I'm concerned that we've got someone doing a piece of work now, their funding runs out, and then that piece of work will stop. And generally when pieces of work stop and then we end up with someone new starting in 2 years' time, you almost have to start from the beginning again. So to me, it seems a very poor return on our investment, or is that not the case in terms of?
No, so the contractor has been following well-established procedures for what she's been doing. So somebody else will be able to pick up if it's not the same person. And there would be an opportunity that in other budgets that we have for the next couple of years that we could have a contractor, not a staff member, to do some work, but it won't be a huge amount. So we can continue to move the project forward, but it will be very slow because we don't have a lot of budget that we can put towards that.
Okay, so in my mind, if we've got someone in the swing of things moving a piece of work through, it's really important we support them to complete it. And I totally agree that understanding what your collection is the first key step. I think heritage has been poorly funded for decades, and we need to change that. And I understand that catching up will take some time, and that we do have budget constraints at the moment. But it really concerns me that there's that risk of loss of heritage because we haven't adequately funded the kaitiaki of our heritage. Do you explore, like we have an amazing cohort of volunteers doing the book fair, do you explore the possibility of volunteer support? You'd probably need someone in that paid role, but to speed up that work or to support them in that work, a little bit like what we do with biodiversity restoration with weed busters and, Friends of the Maitai, that kind of thing.
We do have a couple of volunteers in the park who kind of do quite specific or look after quite specific areas. But to get the most out of them, they need to have good supervision.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of staff resource to put into that at this time.
I'm just wondering if we were looking at funding some good staff supervision plus that role, and then how we could build that volunteer cohort up. That might be a good way forward. The Parks and Reserves team made the comment last week that community volunteers are able to build on their work so much, so that, enhancing their work greatly. So I just wonder if we explore that as an option too. And I'd be really happy if you were going to bring something back asking for an additional amount budgeted, if we could try and find a way of supporting that, I think. And I agree with the Mayor Rachel that central government really needs to think how they can support local government with taking good care of heritage.
Thank you, Kate. Tim. Thank you all. No, so good stuff there. I mean, I've found this park is more than just heritage. It's a great place for venues and weddings and conferences. I know that's part of a strategic plan, and I was quite impressed and excited some of that thinking going back a few years. Any commentary on that going forward with it as a location for conferences? We've obviously had a bit of a change about due to COVID, how those sorts of things have been used, but there's some more opportunities getting used well.
Obviously, at this time, there's been a lot of conferences that are cancelled or postponed, but I think they will come back online as they were. So there is great potential at Founders to make the most of that market, which is a high value venue hire, and that will add to our income.
And anything going forward in the strategic plan that we can help assist in that? Because I assume there's more capacity for conferences and weddings there. I know it's used well in the past, but is there something we can do and help if that's the intent?
So the key venue that probably makes it more difficult for us is the energy centre, because it is so basic, and which makes it very expensive and quite tricky for conference organisers to bring a conference in that's going to use that space. And so a large part of the investment that we're suggesting into the venues is actually into the energy centre to make it a fit for purpose venue that will make it usable for conferences, but that will also have a knock-on effect for community users and other events that are in the park, making it a much more pleasant and easier to use venue.
True, that came up a couple of years ago. I mean, I've seen how good it is, and sometimes it's not till from outside you realise what a good venue it is. Like, for example, my previous life as a photographer, a wedding photographer, I've photographed over 400 weddings, but I've probably done 50 or 60 weddings at Founders, and that's before I was on the council. When people ask, where should I get married, because I get worried about the weather, I'd say Founders, because you've got the old St Peter's Church, you've got the Greenery, which is a beautiful location for reception, and you've got the grounds with water features and sheltered areas, and down a little street and outside the aircraft and the old cars and the fire station. So, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that, but is this public? Can it be utilised more? I mean, I remember it was an amazing spot. It was just a go-to. It was a go-to place when anyone asked where to go to. I said, go and check out Founders, and you don't have to leave the spot.
No, it's a fabulous wedding venue, absolutely. And we do have a lot of weddings that are in the park, and they typically book 12, 18 months out. So, you know, we already have bookings for the next kind of couple of years.
Cool.
There would be potential to have more, particularly in winter, but we're not the best venue in winter. So the Greenery now does have some heating, but we are suggesting some improvements to make that a bit warmer too. And that will extend our season.
Okay. I mean,
and the church, which is freezing in
good
winter.
point. Well, it's great because I know it was always a place for shelter. If you were doing weddings, you knew there was always shelter for both photography and guests wherever you worked on that area. So I think it's got a huge advantage over everywhere else.
Yeah, and the heritage aspect of it is what gives it its point of difference.
Cool.
It's what makes it different from other venues.
And I know I say this every time you come, every year after Founders Book Fair. That Founders Book Fair is brilliant. As you already know, people come from right around the country for that. And I know I've retired. Me and my friend Alistair Cottrell retired from when we combined sports and heritage with our 200-metre dash for the gates there. But I had a quick look on your news coverage, and that race still goes on without Alistair and I. So letting the younger athletes come through. But the books are amazing. I mean, just a little anecdote. Suman and Hillary books. I was going through the adventure section, and I'll flick over just in case there's one signed. But a keen eye opened one up signed by Suman Hillary in your $1 books. He was paid for his trip up here.
Whoops, we missed it.
Yeah.
Can get some really good bargains.
That's great. So
You're not tempted to add some signatures to some of the books that come through? Okay.
Yeah, you should see the benefit ones.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Any other questions? Yep.
I have a quick one. Sarah, what sort of income do you get from the Greenery? I'm quickly looking for it here.
It's all mixed in with one, so we don't actually keep a record of our individual venues.
Right.
But the new booking system, which will be going live over the next month or so, will allow us to analyse that information much better.
Well, I think it'd be a lot more help, in determining the expenditure.
Yeah, absolutely. So our information is very basic at this stage.
That's good to hear.
Cheers, Mel. Not only is Founders a fabulous place for weddings and other get-togethers, but it's a fantastic place for beer festivals. And March Fest was a highlight of the year for me. Martin Phillips and the Chills, it was amazing. But I think a lot of people woke up the next day thinking, oh my God, Nelson is going to be the centre of the biggest COVID cluster the country sees in 2020. And amazingly, it didn't happen. Yeah, but it felt like everyone was partying on the last night of freedom. But it was a fantastic event. And I just want to echo what you were saying about the Energy Centre. I think the Energy Centre has massive potential as a really iconic venue. It's so recognisable, and I actually think it deserves to be world famous in New Zealand, and I hope it gets there because there are very few places like it, and it is so photogenic amongst other things, and it's got a really interesting vibe.
Yeah, we get a lot of really good feedback from event organisers and conference organisers who come and do a tour. They just love the feel of the park, and its quirky buildings, and they are very recognisable and memorable.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, well, thank you very much for all the work and for talking us through it. Kate's got one more question, and then I'm going to move it.
So I have a question around how the original plan just looked at financial stability, and then you've tried to incorporate other forms of sustainability into your document. it's just not quite clear to me in terms of the plan, whether there's some pieces been missed out or whether you feel like it's been captured in other areas. For example, and I'm sorry, I'm moving between pages. On page 77, you've got the objective of improving the standard of venues with the energy centre, the Greenery and the church, which is great, but they're all have tremendous sustainability outcomes as well, because you're insulating and hopefully decreasing your energy costs. That's not reflected on page 78, where you just mention explore opportunities to reduce power usage. And I guess I just think that it should be reflected there that your insulation does in fact result in decreased power usage, and whether I don't know whether into the future you might look at solar or ways of supporting even greater sort of zero carbon footprint. I think there's a role in that environmental sustainability to talk about the grounds as well and the plantings, because they are very special, and you can build heritage grounds which are offsetting carbon emissions. So I think there's an opportunity to talk about the grounds in that environmental sustainability section too.
All right. All good? Thanks. Okay. Yep. So Councillor Skinner, thank you. Mahina, Sarah and Janine. Pat Tim is going to move it. Can we have a second? Seconded by Rohan. No, I'm going to let Trudy second it. Yeah. Thank you, Trudy. Does anyone have any debate? Would anyone like to debate? Not feeling the need to debate myself. No, very good. Okay, I'll put that the Community Services Committee receives the report Founders Heritage Park Strategic Plan, approves the Founders Heritage Park Strategic Plan with budget allocations to be confirmed via the Arts, Heritage and Events Activity Management Plan and the Long-Term Plan, and approves the Founders Heritage Park Collections Policy 2020. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it, carried. Thank you very much. Good to see you, and appreciate your work very much. Now we're going to go into public excluded, which means we're going to have to farewell our youth councillors. Thank you very much, Will, and thank you, Jasmine. I hope it was useful, kind of interesting. Was good. Okay, great. Thanks very much for your contributions. I look forward to seeing you back at a council or committee meeting sometime soon, and see if you can grab, if there's anything, if you feel like some cheer, please help yourself to a cheer pot on the way out. Thank you. See ya. So, can I have someone move that we go into public excluded? Trudy, seconded by Brian. Just so you know, we are on our quorum now. So I am just going to go